We will start in 1 minute. Today we'll continue in section 7.4 on solving equations with rational expressions. So on Friday we went through this list of things to do when solving equations with fractions or rational expressions. But we'll go through this real quick. First thing, find the least common multiple of the denominators, also called the least common denominator. Identify the restricted values. Then multiply every term on both sides of the equation by the least common denominator. The reason that we do that is so that we reduce every denominator to a factor of 1. Then solve the resulting equation and check the results. If the solutions from step 4 are not restricted values, then they are the solutions to the original equation. Okay, we'll try this on this next equation. Solve this equation for y. 1 over y plus 2/3 equals 1/5. The least common denominator. So what is the least common multiple of the denominators? So someone type that in. What's the least common denominator? So go ahead and type it in. Well, I see 15. That's not quite it. Someone else want to take a stab at it? All right, well, one of the denominators has the factor y in it. And so the least common denominator is 3 times 5 times y, or 15y. Okay, now that we found the least common denominator, 15y, let's identify the restricted values. Well, there's only one variable, y, and it's in the denominator. So what's the restricted value? We see the variable y in the denominator of one of the fractions, and denominators are not permitted to be 0. So the restricted value is 0. In other words, we say that y cannot be 0 because y is in the denominator. Therefore, the restricted value is 0. 0 is a perfectly fine number, and it must be included whenever it's necessary. Okay, we found the restricted value. We have the least common denominator. In step 3, we multiply every term on both sides by the least common denominator. So you can think of 15y as 15y over 1 if it helps. 15y over 1 times 1 over y. Then multiply that by the next term, 15y over 1 times 2 over 3. And on the right-hand side, 15y over 1 times 1 over 5. Now we're going to simplify each of those products. 15y over 1 times 1 over y, y divided by y equals 1. So this simplifies to 15. In the next product, in the numerator, we have 15y times 2. In the denominator, we have 1 times 3. 3 goes into 3 once, and into 15 5 times. So this term is 5y times 2, or 10y. And on the right-hand side, 15y over 1 times 1 over 5. 5 goes into 5 once, and into 15 3 times. So this one becomes 3y over 1 times 1 over 1, or 3y. Okay, so this equation looks a lot simpler to solve than the original, in my opinion. So now we just subtract 10y from both sides. We get 15 equals negative 7y. And then lastly, divide both sides by negative 7. And we get y equals negative 15 over 7. To the right of this green line segment, I'll multiply these out a little bit further if clarification is needed. 15y over 1 times 1 over y is 15y over y. In the next product, 15y over 1 times 2 over 3. In the numerator, 15y times 2 is 30y over 1 times 3. And then on the right-hand side, 15y over 1 times 1 over 5, we get 15y over 5. And then you can reduce the fractions. 15y over y is 15. 30y over 3 is 10y. 15y over 5 is 3y. If you'd rather do it that way, that's fine. Okay, let's look at the next example. 2/3 plus 1/5 equals 1 over x. We want to solve for x. Okay, this one, the least common denominator. Well, the denominators are 3, 5, and x. So the least common denominator is 15x. The restricted value, well, this denominator has x in it, so x cannot be 0. So the restricted value is 0. So in other words, x cannot be 0. Okay, then multiply every term on both sides of the equation by the least common denominator. So 15x over 1 times 2/3 plus 15x over 1 times 1/5 equals 15x over 1 times 1 over x. We can multiply the products. 15x over 1 times 2/3 is 30x over 3. 15x over 1 times 1/5 is 15x over 5. On the right-hand side, 15x over 1 times 1 over x is 15x over x. Okay, then simplify each of the fractions. 30x divided by 3 is 10x. 15x divided by 5 is 5x. 15x divided by x is 15. Then on the left-hand side, combine like terms. 10x plus 5x is 15x. 15x equals 15. Then divide both sides by 15. We get x equals 1. Okay, let's move on to the next page. So this is a little more complicated. We have 2 over x plus 2 plus 4 over x minus 2 equals x minus 1 over x squared minus 4. Okay, what's the least common multiple of the denominators? Okay, this denominator on the left has a binomial factor, x plus 2. The next fraction, or the next rational expression, has a denominator of x minus 2. The denominator on the right side is x squared minus 4. X squared minus 4 is a difference of squares, which can be factored. So note that x squared minus 4 is x plus 2 times x minus 2. Okay, so the least common multiple of the denominators has to have the factors that are in the three denominators. So this fraction has a denominator of x plus 2, so the least common denominator has to have x plus 2. The second fraction has a denominator of x minus 2, so the least common denominator has to have a factor of x minus 2. The third denominator, x squared minus 4, in factored form, it's x plus 2 times x minus 2. So we don't need any more factors. The least common denominator is x plus 2 times x minus 2. Now let's find the restricted values. So what are the restricted values? So what numbers are off limits in this equation? A number that makes a denominator, well, a number that you replace x with that makes a denominator 0 is a restricted value. Okay, so let's just look at the denominators. This denominator on the left is x plus 2. What x value would make x plus 2 equal to 0? Negative 2. So negative 2 is a restricted value. Then the next denominator, x minus 2, what x value makes x minus 2 0? Positive 2. The other denominator is already taken into account, x squared minus 4. X squared minus 4 is just x plus 2 times x minus 2. So the only restricted values are negative 2 and 2. That's because x plus 2 is not permitted to be 0, and x minus 2 is not permitted to be 0. So we just say that the restricted values are negative 2 and 2. All right, the next thing to do is multiply every term on both sides of this equation by the least common denominator. When we do so, the result will be an equation with cleared denominators. Okay, so if it helps, you can think of this as x plus 2 times x minus 2 over 1, just so that you don't confuse numerators with denominators. So I'll multiply every term on both sides by x plus 2 times x minus 2. So multiply that by the term 2 over x plus 2. Then also multiply x plus 2 times x minus 2 times 4 over x minus 2. And also on the right-hand side, x plus 2 times x minus 2 over 1 times x minus 1 over x squared minus 4. But x squared minus 4 in factored form is x plus 2 times x minus 2. It's not a requirement to write it in factored form. I'm just doing it here just to make it more obvious what's going to happen. Okay, in the first product, x plus 2, the factor x plus 2 from the numerator divided by the factor x plus 2 in the denominator equals 1. So those factors cancel each other out. In the next product, the binomial x minus 2 from the numerator divided by x minus 2 from the denominator, those cancel each other out. One factor from the numerator, the other from the denominator, but they are the same factor. Then on the right-hand side, x plus 2 divided by x plus 2 equals 1, and x minus 2 divided by x minus 2 equals 1. Okay, in the next line, we'll just write down the factors that survive the canceling. So on the left, we have x minus 2 times 2, and then plus x plus 2 times 4. And on the right-hand side, we just have x minus 1. Now we solve this equation. X minus 2 times 2 is 2x minus 4. And we add that to x plus 2 times 4, which is plus 4x plus 8. And the right-hand side is x minus 1. Combine like terms on the left-hand side. 2x plus 4x is 6x. And the minus 4 plus 8 is plus 4 equals x minus 1. And in the next step, we can do a couple of things at once. We can subtract x from both sides and also subtract 4 from both sides. And we get 5x equals negative 5. And then lastly, divide both sides by 5. We get x equals negative 1. Negative 1 is not a restricted value, so negative 1, x equals negative 1 is the solution. Okay, the next one, 5 over y plus 3 plus 2 over y minus 3 equals 51 over y squared minus 9. Okay, what's the least common denominator? Also called the least common multiple of the denominators.
Y plus 3 times y minus 9.
The least common denominator here is found in a similar way that it was in the previous example. One of the binomial factors in the denominator is y plus 3. In the next denominator, we have the binomial factor y minus 3. In the third denominator, y squared minus 9, that's a difference of squares, which is y plus 3 times y minus 3. So in factored form, the least common denominator is y plus 3 times y minus 3. But that equals y squared minus 9. Okay, we use those to help us find the restricted values. Okay, what are the restricted values?
Negative 3 and positive 3.
Yeah, negative 3 and positive 3. So a y value that makes a denominator 0 is called a restricted value. And the restricted values come from the fact that the denominator y plus 3 cannot be 0, and the denominator y minus 3 cannot be 0. Okay, then multiply every term on both sides by the least common denominator. Okay, every term gets multiplied by y plus 3 times y minus 3. Okay, it often looks worse before it looks better, but the payoff makes it worth it. So in this first product, even though I didn't write y plus 3 times y minus 3 over 1, you need to remember that they are in the numerator. So the factor y plus 3 from the numerator divided by y plus 3 in the denominator, that equals 1. In the next product, y minus 3 divided by y minus 3, those cancel. And on the right-hand side of the equation, since y plus 3 times y minus 3 is y squared minus 9, both factors cancel with y squared minus 9. Okay, we'll write down the surviving factors, y minus 3 times 5 plus y plus 3 times 2. And on the right-hand side, 51. And now we apply the distributive property of multiplication. Y minus 3 times 5 is 5y minus 15. Y plus 3 times 2 is 2y plus 6 equals 51. Combine like terms, 5y plus 2y is 7y. Minus 15 plus 6 is minus 9. Then add 9 to both sides. We get 7y equals 60. And then divide both sides by 7. We get y equals 60 divided by 7. Hey, that is a perfectly fine number for a solution. It's not a restricted value. Okay, the next example is a little more complicated. Not much, but a little. This time we have m plus 11 over m squared minus 5m plus 4 equals 5 over m minus 4 minus 3 over m minus 1. So we want to find the least common denominator, or the least common multiple of the denominators. Well, if we can find the factors of m squared minus 5m plus 4, that will help. Well, we need to know the factors, m squared minus 5m plus 4. So what are the factors of m squared minus 5m plus 4? So factoring is never going to go away now that we've covered it. So Factoring is something that you'll want to always brush up on.
The only thing that would go into all of them is one, isn't it? Wouldn't it be one? Just the only thing that can go into all of them?
The two factors are binomial factors. Okay, I see the answer online. M minus 1 times M minus 4. So that is kind of nice because M minus 4 and M minus 1 are the other denominators. So the least common denominator is M minus 1 times M minus 4. Okay, now we multiply every term on both sides by the least common denominator. Okay, so M minus 1 times M minus 4 over 1 times M plus 11 over the denominator M squared minus 5M plus 4. I'll write that in factored form. M minus 1 times M minus 4. And on the right-hand side, M minus 1 times M minus 4 over 1 times 5 over M minus 4. And then minus M minus 1 times M minus 4 over 1 times 3 over M minus 1. Okay, we get cancellations in the product on the left-hand side. The factor M minus 1 from the numerator divided by M minus 1 from the denominator. Those cancel each other out. And then M minus 4 divided by M minus 4 equals 1, so we cancel those out. On the right-hand side of the equation, the factor M minus 4 divided by M minus 4 equals 1. And then the product on the right, M minus 1 divided by M minus 1, those cancel. Okay, so on the left-hand side, we're just left with M plus 11. On the right-hand side, the first term on the right-hand side, we have M minus 1 times 5. And then we're subtracting the product of M minus 4 times 3. Hey, whenever subtraction's involved, you have to make sure you're on your toes. So let's write M plus 11. M minus 1 times 5 is 5M minus 5. And this means we're subtracting the product of M minus 4 times 3. So we're going to subtract M times 3, or minus 3M. And we're also going to subtract negative 4 times 3. So maybe I should write that. We're going to subtract negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. And whenever you subtract a negative, that's equivalent to adding. Okay, so in the next step, we'll combine the like terms. 5M minus 3M is 2M. And then minus 5 plus 12, because minus negative 12 is plus 12. And a couple of more steps, m plus 11. And on the right-hand side, 2m minus 5 plus 12 is 2m plus 7. All right, we can subtract m from both sides. Subtract m from both sides, we get 11 equals m plus 7. And then subtract 7 from both sides, we get 4 is equal to m, or m is equal to 4. But 4 is a restricted value. Since the least common denominator is m minus 1 times m minus 4, the restricted values are 1 and 4. So since 4 is restricted, we say that the equation has no solution. So watch out for that. Okay, let's try the next example. X plus 13 over x squared minus 7x plus 10 equals 6 over x minus 5 minus 4 over x minus 2. So note that the denominator x squared minus 7x plus 10 in factored form is just x minus 5 times x minus 2. So there are only two restricted values. The least common denominator is x minus 5 times x minus 2. And there are two restricted values, 5 and 2. Okay, but we multiply every term on both sides of this equation by the least common denominator. So x minus 5 times x minus 2 over 1 multiplied by x plus 13. And instead of writing x squared minus 7x plus 10, I'll write it in factored form, x minus 5 times x minus 2. On the right-hand side of the equation, multiply the least common denominator, x minus 5 times x minus 2 over 1 times 6 over x minus 5. And then minus x minus 5 times x minus 2 over 1 times 4 over x minus 2. And then we do the cancellations. X minus 5 from the numerator cancels with x minus 5 from the denominator. X minus 2 from the numerator cancels with x minus 2 from the denominator. On the right-hand side, in the first product, x minus 5 from the numerator cancels with x minus 5 from the denominator. And then in the product on the right, x minus 2 from the numerator cancels with x minus 2 from the denominator. Okay, in the next step, we get x plus 13 equals x minus 2 times 6, and then minus x minus 5 times 4. Okay, now it's just algebra and arithmetic. X minus 2 times 6 is 6x minus 12. And watch out for the subtraction. We have to subtract 4 times x. And we also have to subtract negative 5 times 4. Or another way to say it, we have to subtract negative 20. But if you subtract negative 20, that's equivalent to adding 20. Okay, on the right-hand side, we'll combine like terms. So we get x plus 13 equals 2x plus 8. Then subtract x from both sides. We get 13 equals x plus 8. Then subtract 8 from both sides. We get 5 equals x. But 5 is restricted, so that means there's no solution. So this equation with rational expressions has no solution. Okay, let's look on the next page. Here we have y over y plus 6 equals 72 over y squared minus 36 plus 4. So this denominator, y squared minus 36, that's a difference of squares. Its two factors are y plus 6 and y minus 6. So the least common multiple of the denominators is y plus 6 times y minus 6. The restricted values are negative 6 and 6. Okay, so we have to keep that in mind. Then multiply every term on both sides by the least common denominator. So we have y plus 6 times y minus 6 over 1 times y over y plus 6. And then on the right-hand side, y plus 6 times y minus 6 over 1 times 72 over y plus 6 times y minus 6. And so I put myself in a corner, but here we're going to multiply 4 times the least common denominator. I'll write the least common denominator this time in expanded form. So 4 times the quantity y squared minus 36. We get a couple of cancellations. So the product on the left, the y plus 6 divided by y plus 6 cancel. And in the first product on the right-hand side, we get y plus 6 divided by y plus 6 and y minus 6 divided by y minus 6. The other product, we don't get any cancellations. So we have y minus 6 times y. The first term on the right-hand side is 72. And then we have 4 times y squared minus 36. We get, that's 4y to the second minus 144. So on the left-hand side, y minus 6 times y is y to the second minus 6y. On the right-hand side, when we combine like terms, we get 4y to the second minus 72. Okay, so this is definitely a little more complicated. Since we're going to have a y to the second term, we want to set one side equal to 0 and then solve by factoring. So we'll subtract y squared from both sides and add 6y to both sides. So we get 0 equals 3y to the second plus 6y minus 72. Notice that now we can divide every term on both sides by 3. Since the greatest common factor of the trinomial is 3, divide every term on both sides by 3, we get 0 equals y squared plus 2y minus 24. And this factors pretty nicely. One of the factors is y plus 6. The other factor is y minus 4. So this equation has two solutions, y equals negative 6 and y equals positive 4. But one of those is restricted. Negative 6 is restricted. Y equals 4 is not restricted, so y equals 4 is the only solution to this equation. Hey, let's try the next one, at least get started on it. So the three denominators, 2x minus 2, 3x plus 3, and 12x squared minus 12. So let's look at the denominators in factored form. 2x minus 2 is 2 times x minus 1. The second denominator is 3 times x plus 1. The third denominator is 12 times x squared minus 1. X squared minus 1 is x minus 1 times x plus 1. So the least common denominator well, if we compare the numerical factors 2, 3, and 12, the least common multiple of 2, 3, and 12 is 12. And then the binomial factors x minus 1 and x plus 1. So that is the least common denominator. The restricted values are positive 1 and negative 1. Okay, but then we multiply every term on both sides by the least common denominator. We'll see how far we get. So 12 times x minus 1 times x plus 1 over 1. Here I'm going to factor the denominator, so it's 2 times x minus 1. And then minus the least common denominator, times 2 over 3 times x plus 1. And on the right-hand side, 12 times x minus 1 times x plus 1 over 1 times 5x squared minus 2x plus 9 over 12 times x minus 1 times x plus 1. Okay, we'll get some cancellations. The x minus 1 divided by x minus 1, and also 12 divided by 2 is 6. So this becomes 6x times x plus 1. In the next product, we have a cancellation, x plus 1 divided by x plus 1. And 3 goes into 3 once and into 12 4 times. So this one becomes minus 2 times 4, or 8, times x minus 1. We're out of time, so I'll have to leave the rest of that for you to do. So go ahead and sign in for attendance.